Hello, everybody. My name is Alessandra Lustrati, and I am the Head of Digital Development in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK Government. Today, I am joining this webinar with the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance and partners on a study that has been recently conducted on the regulatory and market analysis for wireless internet service providers in Brazil, Indonesia, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Before we go into the detail of that study, I just want to tell you a little bit about our work on digital development at the FCDO. We define digital development as the support to the inclusive, responsible, and sustainable digital transformation of our partner countries in the developing and emerging world. And we do this through a number of initiatives on policy and programming. Recently, we've published a new digital development strategy for the period 2024-2030. And within that, we made a number of important key commitments to support our partner countries on digital transformation. Commitments around a range of topics like digital public infrastructure, the importance of closing the gender digital gap, and the role of AI for development. But the top deliverable of the strategy actually is something really important. It's last mile connectivity. For us, that is still at the very core of what we do in digital development because it's such an important foundation for everything else that we can do to ensure that digital technologies accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, people know probably that there are still 2.6 billion inhabitants in the world that were still offline. So there's still a lot of work to do. Through the Digital Access Programme of the UK Government, which is a partnership between FCDO and our Digital Science and Innovation and Technology Department, we have been working for the past 5 years or so in trying to support partner countries on a number of issues related to digital inclusion, from digital connectivity to digital skills, access to digital content and services that are locally relevant, cybersecurity, online safety, and also digital entrepreneurship. In the first pillar of the program, the pillar about digital inclusion, we have a really intense work done on promoting last mile connectivity for those communities that are either completely excluded or underserved from the connectivity perspective. We are looking for those technology and business models and those kind of policy and regulatory frameworks that can facilitate affordable and sustainable connectivity for people who are otherwise totally excluded from the digital world. In doing this, we have realized in our approach of working at the systemic level on policy regulation, capability of key institutions, at the market level, both on the supply and demand side, we've realized that spectrum is a really central topic, is a really important element in the overall work on achieving sustainable and affordable last mile connectivity, and in particular those approaches to spectrum that are dynamic, shared, etc., because spectrum is such a scarce resource. And it is at that point, about 3 years ago, that we felt that it was really important to partner with the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance that is specialized in this area and with partners around the world to look at what needs to be done to ensure that the most conducive approaches to spectrum are adopted so that we can achieve last mile connectivity for all. As part of this FCDO DSA project that is within the broader digital access program that I talked to you about, we've done several things, really important activities, but one in particular is about looking at the role of the wireless internet service providers. And very recently, an important study has been conducted on this topic. And this is such a fascinating element, actually, of our work together with DSA and partners that I actually want to now leave the floor to Marta Suarez, who is the president of DSA, and the partners who will talk about this topic in more detail. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, so thank you very much, Alessandra. It's my pleasure as DSA President representing Dynamic Spectrum Alliance now to continue with this webinar about the regulatory and market analysis of wireless internet service providers in the 5 countries of the Digital Access Program. So now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Camilo Zamora, who will introduce the results of this study. For the DSA, one of the important parts of this study was to take into account the situation of the 5 countries and then to compare the level of maturity of the market and also on the regulatory decisions for the 5 countries in order to find the best practices and also to provide some recommendations for every one of the countries. So without any further delay, let me please introduce Camilo, and let's hear the presentation of the results. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Camilo Zamora. I work in TMG and lead the project of the WISP ecosystem analysis that we had the pleasure to do for the DSA last year in 2023. Well, I would like to introduce you a little bit with the project results. The main idea will be to look very quickly about the differences between the 5 countries that we have analyzed. This study was done in Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. Before starting, I would like to thank DSA for the invitation, and it's always a pleasure to work with DSA, and also I would like to highlight the idea that although this project was finished last year, I think that the idea that DSA keeps working with the small providers in different countries, it's a very good practice, and it's a thing to highlight, because this market is growing, and we will see the different stages or where the market are, but we also will have some our panelists today will tell us about the new developments that the markets are having. It's a constantly evolving market and their needs. So let me try to start. This is what we have for today. The agenda for today will be a little bit of a market analysis that we did and the regulatory framework. We also identify best practices. So getting into the detail, I would like to start like having or providing a little bit of a comparison. Of course, what we find in the study is that there is different levels of maturity in the fixed broadband markets, and it is clear that there are countries that has been working on small providers regulations for more time, and they are able to see the results, the best case, and you will see through the presentation that the best practices also are identified in Brazil. While in the other side, we see a Nigerian market, an incipient Nigerian market, with a lot of opportunities to grow. So usually, and this is true for most of cases on the small internet providers, small internet providers start as a company that provides enterprise businesses. Is usually the way that they start. They need some steady income that is more likely to be produced by corporative clients rather than the mass market, if I may. So, and then from the corporative clients, they move towards serving the public, and they are able to expand their infrastructure to continue or to increase their coverage, and therefore the reach for new clients. And I will go back to the idea of an enterprise, because we also have identified best practices in that regard. So what we see here is, again, it's a comparison, and the factors considered for this comparison, as you can see in the screen, is the fixed broadband penetration, the regulation specific for WISP, the number of WISP and the market share, the access to funding, and the spectrum use. And we will refer again to the Brazilian case many times, because this is a success history, if I may. For example, Brazilian operators has more than the 50% of the market share in the fixed broadband market. penetration rates of above 70% or 80% in Brazilian's household of fixed broadband market, which is very different from what we see in Kenya and South Africa with low penetration rates, but also a small amount of internet providers, different or smaller than the big operators. So one factor to consider also is the difficulties that WISP faced when accessing to funding and when accessing to capacity. We will say that these will be the main two issues, and additionally with the spectrum access. But these main two issues are the issues that we found concern the most to small operators. So this is not about ranking or about trying to state what is better or what is worst. I prefer to use the words more developed and less developed market-wise. There is differences, historical differences, there is infrastructure constraints as well that countries are solving constantly. So, and I would like to be clear on that. All the countries that you see in the screen, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Indonesia, and Brazil, are developing fixed broadband networks constantly. There are specific projects in Nigeria, in Kenya, about implementing a backbone fiber network through the country. There are, of course, similar efforts in South Africa and Indonesia, but we also see private efforts on that regard, or a combination of both private and public efforts to deploy fiber through the country, not only in the in the urban areas, but also in the rural areas and the small counties or populated centers. So this is one important thing. The more infrastructure, mainly from the backbone side, the more capacity small providers have to compete to provide services, better services, and in a more affordable way. And all countries in what that you see in the screen are working in that. With differences, yes, but I would like to highlight that every country understand the need of having a backbone infrastructure, and they're working on that. There are many projects going on in these different countries. Again, this is the countries with the analysis, different continents, different landscapes, and of course different results, but commonalities too. And again, I don't want to repeat myself, but one of the main issues that we found for small providers is access to funding, access to spectrum, and access to backbone or capacity. For that and for promoting changes or improvements in the regulations, the small ISPs have organized themselves in different associations. And this is also a way of understanding the level of maturity of the market. So in the mature markets, you will see strong associations, and in the markets that are developing, you will see either associations starting to be created or no associations at all. This is the case in Nigeria when we couldn't find an association of small internet providers per se, and then continue moving forward. We see Kenya. We will hear from our panelists efforts on the creation of the ISP association. There are efforts. We know we have the chance to speak with different stakeholders in Kenya, and there is an association on the works, but still it's in the creation. And in the other hand, you see strong associations like ABGI in Indonesia, ABRINT in Brazil, that they are also going to be or are with us in this panel. And I will let them to explain a little bit what we do and after this presentation. Sorry, what they do in this after this presentation. But you see this level of organization, and this level of organization is important to advocate for improvements in the regulatory landscape, for advocate also for keeping the good practices or changing those aspects in the regulation that may limit the ability of these small operators to continue growing. One important aspect, and again referring to Brazilian case, is the implementation of I would say targeted regulation to improve the regulatory conditions to allow these small providers to grow. That means implementing a specific or special or asymmetric regulation in different aspects of the ecosystem, meaning reporting obligations, for example, meaning access to infrastructure, meaning differential fees as well. And all those efforts has helped to level a little bit the play field when trying to compete with bigger operators. Again, I would like to go back and highlight the main, I would say, commonalities. No matter how developed is the market, no matter how less developed is the market, these three aspects that you see in the boxes are the most important aspects so far for small ISPs. And even if there is a regulation specific for a small ISPs, the same that we, for example, what we see in Brazil or what we see in Kenya with the market structure and the tier 3 operators, or the efforts that has been done in South Africa, even with those regulations in place, there is still an important aspect to be addressed, either in the spectrum access, again, and access to backhaul capacity, or on the targeted support for WISP and small and medium enterprises. We see, or I would say one of the main conclusions is that the WISP are key players in the initiatives to close the digital gap, can be great partners for governments in places where not even the big operators can go or might be interested to go. What we see from our experience in this kind of project is that sometimes there are already operators, small operators, providing internet services in these small and remote areas. And what they need, it's more of a specific and small, I would say, push, and with that, they can continue growing. For example, and again, mentioning the success case of Brazil, the Ministry of Communications when implementing the project for connecting schools, they decided to provide or to create individual contracts for each school that they wanted to connect. So we know about the case of 8,000 schools with individual contracts and with provisions in the hiring process that will help small operators to access to such contracts. When a small operator has this kind of contracts, their cash flow improves, and therefore their ability to continue growing and providing services. So these little projects, these little efforts can make the difference for small operators, local operators, community operators. And those kind of small things are the ones that also may produce a huge change in the rural and remote areas where you see already WISP providing services, and other areas with WISP can, I would say, provide services quickly because they are close, and they only need a little push to be able to do so. Finally, I would like to highlight the best practices identified. I think that I've been talking about such practices in my presentation, but in a summary, you will see that Brazil has the most practices that we have identified. But as I mentioned, there is specific regulation in Kenya as well. The capacity of Indonesian operators to access to spectrum, specifically unlicensed spectrum, has been stressed. One of the most important things, and ABGI is doing work with the regulator regarding the capacity and the way to better utilize the unlicensed bands. We would like to highlight also the development of WISP industry associations in South Africa. There is 2 associations in South Africa, and now our panelists will expand on that. But it is good to see that the regulator also encourage the creation of those associations and work with them in a continuous manner, or in a continuous fashion, if I may. So Brazil, again, a success case. We will hear from Brint regarding the efforts and what Brint does, and I would say the importance or the impact that these measures have had in the market. But again, I would say also, and as a matter of conclusion, that any measure takes time to be implemented and to see the results. The Brazilian process is a process from I would say 20 years, and other countries are just starting, and it will be useful to follow those practices, to adapt those best practices to their own needs and to their own regulatory landscape. But if there is someone that is actually leading the way, there is a country that has done very interesting and successful things to promote the small ISPs environment, is Brazil. And I think that other countries can follow the lead, not only the countries in the map, the countries analyzed, but other countries that might be interested in pushing and promoting and fostering the small ISPs growth. I think that our conclusions points towards the Brazilian experience as the success case, but also, and more importantly, our conclusions points toward that the fact that these small operators can make the difference in places where there is no connection, or where the services might be deficient or can be improved. And it creates an environment of more employment, local investment, growth of investment, and overall increase the facility and the capacity of citizens to access to internet services, which is the primary goal in every other broadband plan or connectivity initiative, and all the technology deployment at the end. So with that, I would like to again thank the DSA for the invitation. There is a lot of work to do, not only in these 5 countries that you see in the screen, but also in all around the world, to foster the development of small ISPs, and with the positive impacts that this idea or these initiatives may have in the population. So thank you very much. And now I would like to turn to our fellow panelists for them to introduce themselves and make a few questions. So thank you again for the DSA, let's continue the discussion with our fellow panelists. Well, and to continue the panel, I would like to invite Christiane Sanchez from Abrint. Christiane will introduce herself and explain us a little bit about Abrint, the Association of Small Internet Providers in Brazil, does. So please, Christine, welcome. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Camilo. It's a pleasure to be with you and all the team. Abrint is a Brazilian association of internet services providers, and we are talking about 2,000 associates nowadays. And our association advocates for regulatory changes and measures that can permit the development of this ecosystem. So we have a great work with Anatel, with our ministry, and also with other countries in order to pursue best practice for regulation. Today, I'm the vice leader of Abrint's Council. We have 23 members in our council, and all of them come with different places from Brazil. So this is a very good characteristic because we can share problems from ISPs from all different parts of our country.
Thank you, Christine. And well, we just saw in my initial remarks and presentation all the advances on the maturity of the fixed broadband market in Brazil. I would say that the policies to foster and to promote the growth of the small providers has been very successful so far, or the most successful of the one that we have analyzed in our project. But I would like to expand a little bit on regarding spectrum access. The Brazilian strategy has been that successful that even the small providers has been participating in 5G spectrum assignment process, but also Brazil has been working for the past years in making a spectrum available. So I would like to expand a little bit with you, Christiane, regarding the importance of the spectrum access for small ISPs and what you see for the future. What do you think Anatel can be continue doing or can be done or can do maybe for in this aspect for the growth of the small ISP and the fixed broadband market in Brazil?
Perfect. Thank you, Camilo, for your question. We understand that the fixed broadband market in Brazil is very consolidated, but it also had some problems yet. So we are talking about 54% of market share of those companies, ISPs companies. But we still have gaps related to credit access and also spectrum access. Those companies, those ISPs companies, has a participation over capex in Brazil, for example, of over than 12% of all capex annually. And when we compare with the big telcos, they had decreased about 3%. So the ISPs keeps on pushing investments in our country. But in order to do that and to continue to have a great development in Brazil, we have few issues like sharing in spectrum. So there are few big ISPs that had access to 5G networks, And this was great because the drawing, I can say like this, the drawing of our auction of 5G was very well done work by Anatel. But now we are talking about more spectrum and more possibilities. So we deal about roaming process, we deal about sharing spectrum, and possibilities to show that some spectrum are underutilized by those big companies. So we have to have a way to access it by second a market. And also we advocate for the 6 gigahertz band to be fully allocated for non-licensed use. We understand that indoor and outdoor possibilities are real and are crucial for capacity of services delivered by the ISPs. So all of these ingredients, let's say this way, of spectrum access is related to asymmetric measures in asymmetric regulation brought by Anatel since the beginning of those companies in Brazil. But it's still a few gaps to follow. And sometimes we have to deal with a lack of knowledge for the smallest companies and to address all their doubts and to fulfill all their possibilities of keep on doing investments in Brazil and seeing our regulator as a regulator that stimulates their process. So this is a main work that we have to do by Abrinch.
Thank you, Christine. And yes, even Brazil being a success case in the development of the fixed broadband market, there is still things to do. Spectrum access as a way to promote and incentivize investment, and also a way to continue competing and being relevant in this market that is changing constantly. So many things to do, even for those countries who has proven to be success histories in the development of the fixed broadband market and promoting the growth of the small ISP providers. So thank you for that, Christine. Thank you. I would like to ask our fellow panelists on South Africa to introduce themselves, to introduce a little bit what they do, and also to provide us a little bit of insight of what we have in South Africa regarding the small ISP providers.
Thank you very much, Camilo and Chris, for this great discussion and this presentation about the wireless internet service providers' activities in Brazil. That was very exciting. And now we are going to hear about the situation in South Africa. We have 3 guests with us, Paul Colmer, Leslie Colmer, and Tim Genders. And let's start with a brief introduction about WAPA. Leslie, can you please tell us about the association and what is your role in South Africa?
Certainly. WAPA has been in existence since 2006, so we're almost as old as the industry itself. We represent the wireless access internet providers. In terms of the regulatory things that are going on, we also provide an education role, anything that affects the wireless industry. So we look after the wireless providers, whether they be the 1- and 2-man bands or whether they be the larger providers. So we look after, we're probably the largest industry representation in South Africa, looking after about 250 wireless internet service providers. We hold regular events, we hold training, we hold regulatory briefings, and we represent the industry to our regulator.
I would like to know, if you could be the national regulator for a day, what is the first regulatory change you would implement to encourage growth within the WISP and community networks ecosystems?
Thanks. I'd love to answer that. The key that we have is to grow the WISP industry, it needs investment is what grows any industry. With fixed wireless deployments, the perception from the bankers is that it's a limited resource and it has capacity constraints. Now, if I could be the regulator for the day, I would immediately eliminate that perception by opening up all of 6 gigahertz to outdoor Wi-Fi, to standard power levels, with the FCA ability to make sure that the incumbents are looked after. Open that entire spectrum up, because that will then remove this impression of a capacity constraint. It will allow at least 100 megabits per second to every home that's implemented. It will connect to Africa very quickly, because only about probably 40% of the homes in Africa are suitable for fiber because of the density. A lot of them are rural, and wireless is the key for that. So I would open up 6 gigahertz standard power and have the mechanisms in place to look after any incumbents and share that spectrum out.
Thanks, Tim. Anything you would like to add, Paul?
Yes, if I was the regulator for a day. Look, within the South African WISP market and the necessity to connect the unconnected, it's eventually going to be carried out by the micro SME, not the big MNOs. And I want, as a regulator, to be an enabler to these micro SMEs, which may even be as low as 1-2-man bands. And they, obviously will get to the point where they can deliver this. But at the moment, there is a situation where there's some regulatory hindrance in license compliance. And we're in a situation where we're under the same obligations as the huge MNOs who employ thousands of people, have their own HR departments, legal departments, administration departments, that the reporting obligations and commitments are exactly the same for a 1 or 2-man SME. And we physically they don't have the time or resources to carry this out by themselves. And it's extracting valuable time of their feet on the ground, doing what they're doing best, which is connecting these unconnected people. So I would try and implement what I would call a softer touch licensing process, moving away from the one-size-fits-all model, where we have a sort of light licensing approach to regulation and reporting, which could be based on revenue, turnovers, or whatever. So it will be more applicable to a license holder in the micro SME market, which would allow them still to be regulated and conform to regulation, but have some relief with regard to constant reporting and everything else, which they don't really have time for. And I would refer this to a soft touch licensing approach. And I believe that would be truly advantageous to get them out there with their feet on the ground, doing what they do best. And that's connecting the people that so desperately need it.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that vision. And now let me ask Leslie, digital under the collaboration of the DSA, under the Digital Access Program, we are having an initiative to mentor small ISPs, small wireless internet service providers in South Africa, in their journey to make sure that they are sustainable in the long term. So could you please let us know about that initiative and what exactly you are doing and how impactful it is?
Certainly. We started about almost a year ago now, in January of this year, was when we originally had the training program. So what we've done is there is a gap in the market. There is a lot of technical training available for new WISPs and startups. And a lot of the WISPs are started out from the technical background of the individual starting it, but they don't have the business knowledge necessary to actually run a business, put a business together, get it funded, run the financial statements or understand the financial statements. So we designed a training course that had two streams, one the business stream and one the actual technical stream. Now, we didn't just do classroom training. What we did is after the training was completed, we then continued to mentor these 4 or 5 companies through the year as they've encountered difficulties, as they've encountered issues. We've been there giving them advice on how they can actually overcome those difficulties. And what's been fascinating, and I think you will find this very interesting as well, is that one of these in particular, has given us some lessons in terms of how the market actually works on the ground in terms of working out their own solutions. So I think it's been a two-way street. And we're coming to the end of the year and we will see the actual financial results, the impact on these WISPs that we've taken through the year, because we obviously have their starting figures. Some were complete startups, some were within their first year, 18 months of operation. And once we have a full financial year figures, we'll be able to see the improvement over that year. We could see the growth on a daily basis, but it'll be interesting to see the actual result at the end of the day, giving them business skills together with the technical skills and a year of mentorship program.
That sounds fascinating. Thank you very much, Leslie. We look forward to seeing the final results of the project, and probably we'll be having some additional sessions or content to present those results. So
Great.
Thank you very much for your opinion, and thank you very much for being part of this study, bringing your own experience in the case of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now let's continue with the case of Kenya. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Barak Otieno, Chairman of the Association of Community Networks in Kenya.
Greetings. My name is Barak Otieno. I'm the chair of the Association of Community Networks in Kenya and also a director at the Aheri Community Network that operates around Lake Victoria, based in Kisumu City. It's been a privilege to chair the Association of Community Networks, which is approximately a year old. And this association came into life or came into being because of a challenge that was posed to us by government. Just to define community networks are simply telecommunication infrastructure for the community, built by the community. There are other schools of thoughts that refer to community networks as a community-centered telecommunications infrastructure. But ideally, community networks come into being to address various communication gaps or various communication needs in communities. In Kenya, we have been fortunate that the government has been at the forefront of championing community networks or community-centered connectivity. In what ways has the government championed community networks? We are among the first countries in sub-Saharan Africa to have a community network service provider license. The community network service provider license is given to not-for-profit entities that are working in the area of digitization and digitalization, basically enabling unserved and underserved communities to tap into the power of the digital world to transform themselves. The community network service provider license differs from traditional internet service provider licenses. Kenya is a Commonwealth country, and so we have a tiered level, or we have a tiered way of licensing telecommunication service providers. We have tier 1 licensees, who are basically the mobile network operators. We have tier 2 licensees, who are basically the gateways. We have tier 3 licensees who are basically infrastructure service providers, or basically entities that deploy infrastructure, provided it is not one network similar to the mobile networks. And to give context, the tier 3 licensees pay approximately $3,000, anything between $3,000 to $5,000, depending on what point or what time of the year they started paying for the license. But as any other developing countries, we have also trained very many young people in telecommunications, in computing, and these young people are making a difference in their respective communities. And COVID-19 was an interesting lesson for the country, because the moment people moved home, or the moment people moved to the rural areas, we realized that communication services were centered in urban areas. And we had a lot of capacity that was lying idle in the urban areas because people were not connected at home. And the economy almost came to a standstill because most people were at home and they were unable to meaningfully engage themselves or meaningfully work, because they were not allowed to go to their offices where they would interact. And this is where the issue or conversations around how to reach out to unserved and underserved areas started, championed by none other than His Excellency the President, who gave the responsibility to the Communications Authority to spearhead this important task force. Of course, among the many measures that the Communications Authority took was to come up with the Community Network Service Provider license with the support of the UK aid, which was part of the systemic enhancements that were being made to make sure that people in unserved or underserved areas were actually connected. And this resulted in a Community Network Service Provider license. Of course, I've talked about the Communications Authority, I've talked about the UK aid, and there's also the Kenya ICT Action Network, among many other partners that contributed towards ensuring that this license is formed. As a member of the Kenya ICT Action Network and a trustee, I had the privilege to be involved in pilot projects that sought to test this concept of community networks. And I'm glad that many of them are actually active community networks that are serving the community. So which way for Kenya? And I think that's what the question really asks. I think the future is community networks. To put in some statistics, we have, according to statistics from the Communications Authority, we have approximately 98% coverage of telecommunication infrastructure. But the definition of this coverage is normally centered around urban areas. According to the Electoral Boundaries Commission, or rather our agency that handles election, because we normally rely on the internet to vote, they indicate that only 75% of the country has coverage. GSMA, on the other hand, indicates that there is only 30%, actually they put it lower at 23% of citizens that are meaningfully using the internet based on the number of smart devices that are sold by the various mobile phone companies. Therefore, we are in agreement that there is approximately 60 to 70% of the citizenry out there that is unserved and underserved, despite the advances in telecommunication. And looking at the changing trends in telecommunication, the cost of connectivity is almost going to be free in the near future. 10 years ago, we were paying approximately more than $1,000 for 3 MB of internet. Right now, nobody is using 3 MB in the community. A lot of changes. And so that means that very soon, connectivity is going to be free. So what then will we be doing? It means that the telecommunication infrastructure will be used for other value-added services that inform, educate, and entertain the community. And so the future is community networks. The communities are actually going to dictate the content that is suitable for them. And as a community network operator, I have seen that various communities have different tests based on the cultural nuances in those particular communities. In the urban areas, you'll find that the youth really love the English Premier League. But when you go to rural areas, they want to watch their rural music. They want to watch programs that address agriculture or issues that affect them at community level. So content is going to be another significant issue. From where I sit, I think we now need to sort out the issue of middle mile. Make sure that we have data centers at community level where content for the community can be uploaded and where the community can be able to access infrastructure services at a lower cost. As a community network service provider, one of our biggest costs comes from transit. I'm glad that working in partnership with the Communications Authority and the ICT Authority in Kenya, we are exploring mechanisms of utilizing the national optic fiber infrastructure or government infrastructure to serve the community. The government has given us a challenge to connect primary schools, to connect public spaces, and to utilize the infrastructure to generate resources that will enable us to maintain the infrastructure and also to serve the community. Those are some of the things that I would look at even as we look at the future of community networks in Kenya. But I must say that the future is community networks. The future is bright. Thank you.
Now let's continue with Nigeria. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Kendall Anani from TISETI. So Mr. Kendall, thank you so much for being with us. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kendall Anani. I'm the founder and CEO of TISETI. TISETI operates a solar-powered wireless internet service in 3 countries, Nigeria, Ghana, and soon to launch in Cote d'Ivoire. We've been in business for 12 years. We have over 3 million users that have accessed our network in Nigeria alone, and we're one of the top internet providers in the region, West Africa.
Great, thank you very much. Could you please also let us know which incentive will lead to a better and more affordable offer of broadband connectivity in Nigeria?
So fiber backhaul is something that if you have more of it, you can never have too much of it. The more fiber backhaul you have in the regions that are not connected currently or not underconnected would help reduce the cost for internet providers like myself. And then most of the equipment we use in as a wireless internet provider, we import them into the country. And so reduction in the import duties or even elimination will help accelerate investments by internet providers into those regions. Then sales tax, there's a lot of multiple taxation, and then harmonizing them into a single sales tax or based on the revenue charged will help. And then you can never have enough investment in fiber backhaul. So be it the government itself executing some of the projects to connect all the states in Nigeria with fiber, or even private sector investment in those locations, because we have a significant glut of submarine cables over the last couple of years coming into the country. But the real challenge is to take it from the point of entry of the submarine cables to the end users is where there's still a huge gap. And so executing those kind of projects, helping us import equipment easier, reducing the cost of the right of way for fiber, and then harmonization of sales tax and additional fiber will significantly bring down the price of to the end user. Because if you think about how the submarine cable, the impact the submarine cables also had in dropping the price of IP transit, this will be the next level where the customer can gain a lot of benefits from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights and also for all the hard work you're doing in this task of connecting the unconnected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Oluboyo from Nigeria. He has been in this business of providing affordable connectivity for many, many years. So, Mr. Oluboyo, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Oluwaseun Oluboyo. I work with IPNX Nigeria Limited, and we have been in the business of providing connectivity solutions since about 2001. We have worked with VSAT and microwave and fixed wireless access. And back in 2003, we launched our fixed wireless platform for delivery of service to mostly enterprise customers. And then back in 2006, we added a platform that allowed us to deliver services, again, using fixed wireless access and non-line of sight technologies to residential customers across Nigeria, major cities in Nigeria, Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, and Kano. Then back in 2011, we started the rollout of our fiber to the home network, and a lot of our customers have since been migrated to that. We still do have customers on the fixed wireless and microwave platforms.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I would like to ask you, which incentives would lead to a better and more affordable offer of broadband connectivity for users in Nigeria?
Well, before going to the matter of the incentives, I think it's a good idea to look at some of the challenges that internet service providers experience and the challenges we face in Nigeria. A lot of it is infrastructure based. So there are challenges getting the backhaul connectivity to those underserved and unserved areas where there are so very few options for wireless connectivity. Yes, there's some mobile broadband connection or coverage, some in the 2G or 3G ranges. However, it's insufficient. And mobile providers tend to prefer the commercially viable city centers and other urban areas to the less populated rural areas. We also have challenges with vandalism and keeping the equipment safe even when deployed. We have challenges with the ease of doing business, multiple taxation, some difficulty with going through the regulatory processes and things like that. That are challenges for ISPs, especially in those less densely populated areas. And so in terms of incentives, I would say one of the key ones will be to make it easier to do business, right? Have some sort of package for the smaller ISPs such that they can leverage the collective economies of scale to provide services that are sustainable and affordable to the end users. So if we can get help with wireless, with wired, that's backhaul connectivity to the internet. One of the projects that we're looking forward to is the work the federal government is doing with additional rollout of the fiber backbone across the country. And I think if that can be done from a social point of view, which is not having connecting ISPs pay the full commercial rates for that, but have some sort of subsidy, whereas they can pay something, right, to defray some of the costs, but the government is not aiming to actually charge them full rates for such connectivity because in many cases they simply can't afford it and they can't pass those costs on to their customers as well. And also in the protection of infrastructure. So recently there was the executive order about the protection of critical, declaring telecoms infrastructure as critical national infrastructure. We'll look forward to the enforcement of that actually makes it, makes attacks on telecoms infrastructure prosecutable. I think when that goes into force and is actually implemented and enforced, then there's a better chance that this equipment can actually run their life without interruptions or vandalism. So I think those are some of the things that can be done.
Thank you very much for bringing your expertise and local perspective. That's very much appreciated. And well, thank you, Mr. Oluboyo. And we look forward to hearing more successful cases about what you're doing in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.